Professor Nilthara had taught theoretical conflict resolution at the Intergalactic Peace Institute for 47 years. Her lectures were renowned across 17 systems for their philosophical depth and complete absence of anything resembling actual conflict. Students learned about game theory, diplomatic frameworks, and mathematical models for de-escalation, all from the safety of cushioned seats in climate-controlled lecture halls. Then Jake Morrison enrolled. The human sat in the back row of her auditorium, looking deceptively harmless in his institute uniform. Professor Nilthara, a graceful Sabanian whose species had evolved past physical confrontation 3 million years ago, barely noticed him during the first week. He took notes, asked reasonable questions, and seemed to integrate well with the other students. The incident occurred during her lecture on nonviolent response to hostile scenarios. Consider the following thought experiment. Professor Nilthara projected a holographic scenario onto the main display. You're approached by an aggressive entity demanding resources. You have no weapons. Your communication device is non-functional. What is the optimal response? Tentacles, appendages, and various limbs rose throughout the auditorium. Compliance while seeking escape, suggested a Thorian student. Posture of submission to reduce threat assessment, offered a Quellian. Appeal to shared biological imperatives, chimed a Matherian. Jake's hand went up. Yes, Mr. Morrison? Fight back. The auditorium fell silent. Professor Nilthara's bioluminescent spots flickered, confusion mixed with concern. I'm sorry, could you clarify? The scenario specified no weapons. Don't need weapons, Jake said simply. You've got your body. That's always a weapon. Several students' translation devices sparked trying to process this. A Piscian in the front row made a distressed chirping sound. Professor Nilthara's training and patience was being tested. Mr. Morrison, this is a theoretical exercise about de-escalation. Violence is not. Can I demonstrate? Demonstrate what? How a human would actually handle that scenario. Every instinct Professor Nilthara had developed over her long career screamed that this was a terrible idea. But academic curiosity won out. Very well. A brief, theoretical demonstration. Nothing physical, of course. Jake stood and walked to the open space at the front of the lecture hall. Okay, Professor, you're the aggressor. Come at me like you're trying to take my stuff. Professor Nilthara approached slowly, her movements deliberately non-threatening. I am demanding your resources. Jake moved. What happened next would be analyzed in incident reports for months. In less than 2 seconds, Jake had closed the distance, executed what he later called a basic hip throw, and had Professor Nilthara, gently, she would emphasize later, on the ground with her primary ambulatory limb controlled in what humans apparently called an R-bar. See? Jake said cheerfully, maintaining the hold. Leverage, center of gravity, joint manipulation. No weapons needed. Just basic grappling. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Students screamed in 17 different languages. 3 crystalline beings shattered from shock. 2 gaseous students dispersed entirely. The emergency medical team arrived within 90 seconds, expecting casualties. Professor Nilthara, once she recovered from the shock, found herself in Dean Voxthar's office for the second time that semester, the first involving the human girl who'd smiled with her teeth. He attacked you. The dean's scales had turned disciplinary red. In front of 40 students. During a lecture on Inno violence. Actually, Professor Nilthara said slowly, her analytical mind finally catching up to her trauma. He demonstrated a form of conflict resolution. Highly physical, deeply disturbing, but effective. Effective? Half your class is in therapy. Yes, but consider the implications. She pulled up the lecture hall footage. I approached with clear hostile intent. Mr. Morrison neutralized the threat in 1.8 seconds, using only his body, with no significant injury to either party. By human standards, this was apparently restrained. Dean Voxler watched the footage again, his scales cycling through confused colors. "Professor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that humans have a completely different definition of conflict resolution. We teach theory, philosophy, and mathematical models. They teach practical application, physical solutions to physical problems. That's barbaric. That's survival on a Class 13 death world." Professor Nilthra stood, her spots now showing scientific fascination purple. "Dean, every species at this institute evolved on worlds where conflicts could be resolved through communication, retreat, or simply outlasting the opponent. Humans evolved on a planet where predators could kill them in seconds, where survival meant fighting back. So what do you propose? That we allow Deathworlders to demonstrate combat in peace studies lectures? I propose," she said carefully, "that we create a new elective, practical threat response from Deathworld perspectives. Heavily supervised, medically monitored, and completely optional." The dean's scales turned skeptical orange. "You want to teach our students violence?" "I want to teach them that peace means different things to different species. For humans, peace isn't the absence of ability to fight, it's the choice not to. Mr. Morrison could have hurt me badly. He didn't. That restraint, that control, that's the real lesson." 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison stood in front of a much smaller, voluntarily attended class in a specially reinforced gymnasium. Students watched from behind protective barriers as he demonstrated what humans called martial arts, controlled, stylized combat that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. "This is judo," Jake explained, moving through forms in slow motion. "It's about using your opponent's energy against them. In human culture, studying how to fight is often the path to understanding how not to fight." Professor Nilthra watched from the observation deck as Jake continued his demonstration, showing how force could be redirected, how violence could be controlled, how the capacity for harm could coexist with the choice for peace. A Thorian student raised a manipulator appendage. "Mr. Morrison, on your world, many study these martial arts?" "Millions," Jake confirmed. "Kids start learning at age 5 or 6. And this makes your society more violent?" Jake smiled, carefully, with lips closed. He'd learned that lesson. "Opposite, actually. When you understand violence, really understand it, you respect it. You use it only when necessary. The most dangerous humans I know are the most peaceful, because they don't need to prove anything." Professor Nilthra's spots glowed with understanding. Humans hadn't turned her lecture into combat training to be aggressive. They'd done it because to them, knowing how to fight and choosing not to was the highest form of peace. It was terrifying. It was fascinating. And it was the most important lesson she'd learned in 47 years of teaching. Sometimes, she realized, the path to peace requires understanding war. Humans had learned that lesson on a death world where survival demanded it. Now they were teaching the galaxy what that wisdom truly meant.